5 years ago, I stated that Obama would take the country apart, piece by piece, that he would cause a civil war in this country. In hindsight, we can see how many things have come to pass. My greatest heartache is that we sacrificed thousands of our American heroes liberating Iraq, only for President Obama to pull out all troops leaving Iraq now to be taken over by the terrorists. What does he say about that? Nothing. Governor Romney warned us about Russia's aggressions. Now we have seen his concerns come to fruition. What does Obama say about that? Nothing. He has been warned numerous times by Prime Minister Netanyahu that our most dangerous enemy now is Iran, who will most definitely have the nuclear bomb. And it will not be for peaceful purposes. It will be to destroy Israel and America, as they have stated. And we certainly can believe these threats. Let us remember, let us not forget Benghazi. Let us not say, what difference does it make? Obama found a perfect way to put this under the rug, blaming Republicans, saying that they just want to find fault with his administration. And still, to this day, we don't know the truth. Let us not forget the unspeakable way our veterans have been ignored and many left to die in many of our veteran hospitals. Let us not forget the IRS scandal. Does he think that the American people are stupid? That they would believe that Lois Lerner is completely innocent and did not target all these conservative groups? And suddenly all the records are lost. Nothing to be found to show her guilt. And his newest and latest destruction, which you've just seen on the show, encouraging and allowing millions of poor illegal children from Central America who will be a great burden monetarily for our country, and they are already spreading tuberculosis, scabies, and chickenpox and putting our own children at risk of catching these diseases. And this very serious influx has been brought about not to benefit the young immigrant children, but in order to benefit the Democrats in the 2016 election.
You know, John, when you talk about this benefiting the Democratic Party, it's a very different party than it was than when you and I were young men.
You bet.
And when we come back, I want us to pick up there. I want to talk about what has happened to the differences of not just the parties, but to the real breakdown of this country, and continue as you share this eloquent message. Powerful. I listened to your message, and I'm drawn into the fact that you are courageously sharing your heart with the American people, but also it's a word of warning. And we were talking about how the Democratic Party has really changed. It used to be that the parties weren't that different. They had a little different view of life in the world, but things have changed, haven't they?
Yeah, very, very strongly. The Democrat Party has become a very negative force. I'm going to go to this now. It's more socialistic in their thinking, and they have they've given young women the wrong ideas about what democracy really is. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is the gang leader for all the wrong information to our young women, convincing them that Republicans are stopping their liberties and freedoms of reproduction, when the truth is, as the Supreme Court upheld, that religious freedoms are being infringed upon. We're all aware, I'm going to go to this, the latest atrocities that have taken place in Israel. You've brought this up.
Absolutely.
3 young teens have been killed mercilessly, and hundreds of rockets are still being fired at Israel's civilian population. Obama promised Prime Minister Netanyahu, America is your ally and we will cover your back. So why does he continue to send billions to the Palestinian Authority, who have recently allied themselves with Hamas, an acknowledged terrorist organization, who are responsible for these crimes? Is that covering his back? Obama wrote a book about his father, who he seems to idealize. It's a fact that his father was a Marxist who hated America because he saw America as aggressors. Meanwhile, it was America who has helped all the other nations whenever they were in need. Obama never has acknowledged that, and in fact went across the world apologizing for us, and is piece by piece whittling down our military strength, the strength all the world has relied on. And in doing so, he has paved the way for the most violent radical elements across the world to thrive. My dear friends all over the world, please pay attention to what is taking place in our great America. Stand up for your freedoms. Don't be afraid to express wrong when you see it. And for us, let us bring our country back to what we once were and are obligated to be: a strong America, love of life, and freedom. May God bless us.
John, that is beautiful. You know, when I hear your heart, and I'm thinking, I don't know many people elected to public office who have the courage to say as boldly and as clearly a message to America as what you've said, and you do it from a position in the entertainment industry where so many people in your business are afraid to speak out because it can be so detrimental to one's career in Hollywood. Why are you so unafraid when so many are fearful?
Well, you know that lots of people are feeling what I feel. The people in this audience are feeling what I feel, and people all across our country are feeling this frustration of not being able to turn the tide. And so a person like myself who has occasionally a microphone, it's up to me to use it, of course. The producer of Dinesh D'Souza's film, very wonderful fellow, was asked why he stood up in Hollywood. And he was the producer of Schindler's List and many great movies. And that's why I reiterate, this film is something to see. It's very, very well done. And it's packed with very important information. But he was asked why he did it. He said, aren't you afraid in your community? And he said, no, look. He said, that's not important. He said, I'm thinking about my grandchildren. And that's where I'm thinking about this new generation. Let's do everything we can to bring back America. Let's do everything we can to protect our children and our grandchildren.
Thank God you are doing it. And after when I hear you, I think 3 words: God help us. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
I may sound like a Bible beater yelling up a revival at a river crossing camp meeting, but that don't change the truth none. There's right and there's wrong. You got to do one or the other. You do the one and you're living. You do the other and you may be walking around, but you're dead as a beaver hat. Crockett.
Breaking tonight, sources telling the Kelly File there is a new worry on our southern border tonight, with border agents overwhelmed by this huge recent surge in illegal immigrants. The cartels are now taking advantage. Filmmaker Dennis Michael Lynch traveled down there this week and found this.
That's why I told you it's very important, guys, to follow Mr. Dennis Lynch.
South Texas. I'm going to show you 4 things. Number 1 is the bridge, the international
bridge
from the U.S. going into Mexico. It's got to go through a preserve.
It got to go to the preserve.
Right
Pause. Preserve. Continue. This is what Dennis Lynch is talking about. Preserve. Bam. There you go. Exactly what he's talking about. All the people that was there that Fox News can't show you. I will show you.
Today, hundreds of protesters blocked the street, leading to a border patrol. A dramatic standoff in the Inland Empire today. Hundreds of protesters blocked the street, leading to a border patrol station refusing to let buses full of undocumented women and children They were flown from southern Texas to San Diego this morning. They quickly boarded 3 buses and headed for Murrieta, where agents there were going to process them. Buses carrying migrants from overcrowded facilities on the Texas border turned around today after encountering protesters at a Border Patrol processing center in Murrieta. U.S. authorities are trying to deal with tens of thousands of immigrants who have flooded across the U.S. border with Mexico since October. But the move to Murrieta has residents there.
Now, if you paid attention to
The
documentary, you will know that it's more than tens of thousands.
Tom Wade has been following the story all day. He joins us live from Murrieta now. Tom.
And Susie, some very tense moments earlier today, and protesters are still out here in some impressive numbers. Take a live look. On one side of the street that you're looking at right now, those are supporters of the undocumented immigrants. Those numbers have been growing all day.
Now that takes you back to the Davy Crockett scene.
Barricading them there, kind of forming a perimeter across the street. What you have are protesters.
That's why I put the Davy Crockett in there.
Undocumented immigrants not being deported. They believe they should be sent
And
back
that
to
he
their home
reminds me
countries
of
right away.
Alex
And a
Jones a
group
little
of
bit,
protesters blocked buses carrying
but in the radio
undocumented
real
immigrants
world
as they
sense.
made their way to a U.S. Customs and Border Protection facility in Riverside County, California.
100 undocumented migrant children and their parents were flown from Texas to Southern California today in the latest chapter of what has become an overwhelming border crisis in this country.
About 140 migrants, mostly families and children, were met by dozens of protesters who waved flags and signs denouncing illegal immigration. The migrants were diverted to the Border Patrol facility in Chula Vista.
See, that's what happens, guys, when you make YouTube videos. You push the issue, you make people stand up. Even if you think somebody only viewed my page only 183 times, my analytics tells me my video's been viewed over 500 times. Just nobody actually fully watched it, I guess, so they don't be tracked or something. But
Bitterly divided protesters.
that's what my analytics tell me. Now look at that.
Issue. Hold the line outside the Murrieta Border Patrol facility this evening.
This was the scene earlier today.
Can somebody say Davy Crockett?
One by one, many mothers carrying their babies were flanked by Border Patrol officers as they boarded buses for the 1-hour drive to Murrieta. Here they were greeted by angry protesters, furious, they say, by what they call refugees being bused into their small city. They blocked streets, waved flags, and squared off with immigration advocates.
So you think once this gets around, people start seeing this, and they start they're gonna start protecting their border. They're gonna start standing up, and then it's gonna be, I can't say it,
Some local residents carried signs and American
but you know if you're
flags
watching
as they
this
blocked the
video.
road. The buses finally had to turn around and headed to an undisclosed location.
Now, according to the latest ABC News Washington Post poll, nearly 6 in 10 Americans support a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants.
To block buses carrying dozens of undocumented immigrants, including children, who are arriving in the town of Murrieta today for processing. Murrieta city leaders oppose the transfers, saying it's a burden on their town and raises safety concerns. Authorities say the move is designed to ease.
10 says the bus carrying undocumented immigrants arrived. Protesters blocked the road.
When someone say Clive and Bundy scene, you see though, it's just women out there in the front lines. Damn. That was immigrant.
The situation has increased
Or
the
alien,
potential
my bad.
for drug and human trafficking as border agents deal instead with the flood of children.
Real tight to it right now. So I testified the center of gravity is the Rio Grande Valley. That's where it's a transshipment center for the nation right now. It's relates to drugs. So when I say drugs, that's heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, and marijuana, and human smuggling and trafficking. Which human trafficking is going on as well. Not just smuggling.
More than 52,000 unaccompanied children have been apprehended entering the United States illegally since October.
Immigration officials say if the immigrants pass criminal checks, they will be released on their own recognizance and told to report to a local.
See, back then in the Davy Crockett days, you just got shot if you'd have got crossing the border. Crossing the border, excuse me. And go do your history. That's why I put old John Wayne up there.
Police stood between buses and protesters as the vehicles turned around, headed back on a freeway towards San Diego.
Now that's the power of a protest.
Instead, tonight they are at a facility near the Mexico border in San Ysidro.
But thousands more do make it across. In fact, more than 52,000 unaccompanied children have been caught crossing the border since October. It's a huge surge of immigrants flooding U.S. facilities.
Don't even listen to the numbers. It's just unreal. It's all propaganda.
Facility, you know, the Hamas stockpiles, then they don't have to, they don't want to go in on the ground.
They don't want to, but what we're being told is that they have these tunnels and that they're exploiting, the Palestinians, Hamas are exploiting these tunnels, and Israel is really left with very little choice but to go in on the ground, hence the tens of thousands of soldiers who are getting ready to do that, we're told.
Well, Hamas has made this decision somewhat easier for the Israelis because of the response to the ceasefire offer. If they had accepted the ceasefire, we wouldn't be talking about a ground invasion.
They told Israel to pounce in.
Exactly. We're only doing this now. We're only having this conversation because Hamas's response was to fire in hundreds more rockets into Israel, specifically going after the most densely populated areas that they could. And so now the Israelis are once again in a position where they would rather not go in on the ground. That's messier from a casualty perspective. It's also messier from an international relations and public affairs perspective. But they want to dismantle this terror network. Netanyahu says he's very serious about this. He says they will get the calm that they need. And I think that we should take him at his word. So unless there's a ceasefire, this is what's going to happen.
So they go into this negotiation brokered by Egypt, and Israel is saying, we'd like you to stop bombing us, and Hamas is saying, well, we would like you to stop existing. And one wonders how any negotiation can go forward.
There's no negotiation that can go forward. And the problem with it now is it will now start mounting with a lot of casualties. Why? Because the Palestinians, the Hamas, uses its people to protect its missiles. Israel uses its missiles to protect people, but Hamas uses people as human shields. So we will now start seeing civilian casualties because Hamas puts its rocket launchers, its military facilities, its arms depots in apartment buildings, in schools and hospitals. They want to have the big casualties because they want to play to the World Court of Public Opinion. Say, see, look at all the terrible damage Israel's doing to us. Therefore, not only does Israel not have the right to exist, they're the aggressors, even though it was the Palestinians who attacked.
It is sick. And Buck, to explain to the viewers how is this relevant to their lives? Obviously, there are a lot of Americans who watch very closely Israel and the Middle East, but how is this affecting lives here at home, safety here at home, and what role did we play in what's happening overseas tonight?
Well, it affects us for one, because obviously a lot of Americans have family and friends who are in Israel, who are in the cities that are currently existing under this reign of terror, which is what's happening. They're specifically firing missiles that can't actually really be targeted, missiles that are just intended to fall on literally anybody in a populated area. This is how Hamas does business.
They don't care
if it hits an orphanage, if it hits a home for old ladies, Hamas thinks, great, we've committed the most atrocious thing we possibly can. It also, of course, affects us because we have Israel as our strongest ally in the Middle East, and the stability that we are hoping to once again bring back to the Middle East, or relative stability, I guess, under this administration, has been pretty terrible. So there's a lot of reasons why I think we have to focus in on Hamas right now and try to get an understanding of the moral calculation that's at play. I mean, for one, the Israelis, as Katie pointed out, are trying to do the least damage they can to get this violence to stop. They just want this to end. But Hamas, in some sort of perverse reverse incentive, actually wants more casualties to occur among the Palestinians, because then they turn to the world and say, look at the big bad Israelis. Look what they do to us. So Israel wants casualties to end, to stop. They want peace and calm. Hamas wants more dead people, more women and children out on the streets being laid out for the cameras. And until they have had enough of that, they're not going to stop these rockets.
Was there any role for us to have played here, KT? You know, John Kerry tried to broker some sort of a peace process that failed miserably. You know, he said an artificial deadline that they did not meet, and then, of course, that was the end of it. And, you know, there was a lot of questioning about whether he should have said, okay, 9 months from now, it better be done.
Yeah, well,
and 9 months came and went, and it wasn't done, and then we looked a little, you know,
it was a hopeless
ineffective
task anyway. What the United States needs to do is understand two things. If Israel ceases to exist, if Israel's now surrounded on every single side of Israel, it has an enemy. It has either Al-Qaeda or ISIS or Hamas or anybody. All those groups want to exterminate the state of Israel. The United States is potentially drawn into something like that, but I think more importantly, understand the only way you ultimately defeat radical Islam is starve them. Why? Because they have Arab oil money is fueling all sides of the fighting. I mean, it is the mother's milk of terrorism, and until we become energy independent, until we drive the price of oil down on the ground, these groups are going to use that money to attack Israel, to attack the United States, to attack each other.
Interesting. KT, thanks for being here. Buck, you too.
Thanks.
You say they were not given adequate notice that the illegal children would be headed their way. All this is as Congress considers the president's request for nearly $4 billion. The president says it's to help the border control agencies deal with the sudden influx of illegal immigrants. But critics of the money plan say the main issue driving the crisis are President Obama's immigration policies.
Well, our view, I think, as House Republicans is, look, we're not going to write a blank check for over $4 billion or scrubbing the number. It's going to be a more targeted approach probably through the end of the fiscal year. But also on the policy side, among the Speaker's working group, we're looking at things like changing the 2008 law.
Steve Santani is live with the news from Washington. And Steve, how does Governor Perry envision using the National Guard?
Well, Harris, he says it would provide vital resources along the border to help the agents there who are already overworked. Now, Perry met with President Obama last week in Texas to discuss this ongoing crisis, and today he said that in order to ease the current crisis, the National Guard could be deployed to reinforce border security. Listen.
And it's important to do that because this flood of children is pulling away the Border Patrol from their normal duties of keeping bad people, keeping the drug cartels. They're being distracted. So that, I will suggest to you, is a very obvious reason that those National Guard troops should come play an important role.
Perry also criticized the president for not visiting border facilities where the immigrant children are being processed. That during his trip to Texas last week, Harris.
You know, Steve, even some Democrats say the president should have gone to the border, our southern border with Mexico, but they're still defending him.
Yeah, they say this is a humanitarian crisis driven by events in Central America and is not a result of the president's immigration policies. And they point out that in dealing with this influx, the president is following a law signed by President Bush that requires an immigration hearing for Central American children crossing the border.
Republicans keep saying, well, we can't fix the immigration issue because we don't trust the president to enforce the law. And then when the president actually follows the law in 2002 and 2008, the very law that that was signed by President Bush, they say, well, he should do something different.
An estimated 52,000 Central American children have already crossed the border without documents since October of last year, and the count continues to rise, Harris.
Steve Santani, thank you very much. And the World Cup has runneth over, so to speak. Germany took it all. It went down to the wire.
There are people that think we don't have National Guard down here. We've got a substantial National Guard presence that I've directed down here back over the course of the years. But in addition to them, that 1,000 number National Guard that we keep asking for is what's so important. When you add that 1,000 National Guard troops, the visual of that is what's so powerful. And that is what gets sent to Central America very quickly, is that, you know what, this border's not for us anymore. We can't just come across anymore. And it allows the Border Patrol to get back to doing what the Border Patrol does and does best, which is interdict all these criminal activities. That's the goal here, is to impress upon the president, impress upon the administration, impress upon Washington that if you want to secure the border of this country, you can. That's the first step in dealing with the humanitarian crisis, because if you don't staunch the flow, then it's just only going to get worse. So boots on the ground, drones in the air, strategic fencing that you saw out of the helicopter, those three things will secure this border.
All right, so first of all, these boats fly. What do you got?
We got triple 300.
Triple 300. Yeah, you got 900 horseback. The jack plate will come up. It'll operate into 12 inches of water, and that's why this becomes a very, very usable type of a vessel. And so almost anywhere in the Rio Grande now, we can operate. We realized that we weren't going to get the support from the federal government, so we had to do something. You know, we made requests with the Navy before to come in, and you know, this is an international border. Why shouldn't the Navy be in here with a show of force?
What's amazing is these guys were pointing out to me different areas where literally you see a path, and there are different paths where obviously corridors that are well-known,
and these are corridors that have been used for years and years. I mean, this problem is not new from the standpoint of people penetrating illegally across the country, or across from Mexico into our country. What's new is this mass of young people that are used as a feint, as a distraction,
for our Border Patrol instead of doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is interdicting drugs, stopping illegal activities, pushing back on the drug cartels.
Look at this boat behind me. It's well armed.
Yeah.
It is, and I was asking some of the guys if they've had to fire or have been fired upon. Some boats have been fired upon.
I suggest to you probably all of them have been. You need to have this type of deterrent because, the last thing you want to be is outgunned by the drug cartels, and we were historically.
And coming up, Texas Governor Rick Perry will join me on set to talk more about what we saw on that exclusive border tour. Plus, he'll explain why he believes that the president should have been on that chopper and on that boat. With more coming up this later today. And then also we'll speak directly with a local Border Patrol agent. Does he believe he's getting all the tools that he needs from the Obama administration to put an end to this crisis? That important interview is still ahead as Hannity and this investigation continues. Chaos on the border, straight ahead.
The sage and the need to retaliate. There is a need to leave. There is a need to end this operation when the Israeli army is in control over the whole Gaza Strip.
And the IDF, Israel Defense Forces, are warning people here in northern Gaza to evacuate their homes, to head to shelters, and that could be a sign that something major may be in the works, possibly even a ground offensive. Brett?
John Huddy live in Gaza City early Wednesday morning. John, thank you. Now to Iran, where Secretary of State John Kerry says there are very real gaps between the Tehran government and the West over nuclear issues. Kerry says there has been tangible progress on some key subjects, and that talks will continue until at least some.
Hamas said that they did not get enough in exchange, and there was bargaining back and forth. We know, as you talked to Jen Psaki earlier in this half hour, that John Kerry has been involved, but the bottom line is that nothing is resolved, and sometime after 10 o'clock tonight, Israel time, the Prime Minister announced that for all intents and purposes, they were going in.
Andrea, what about Egyptian-led peace talks, effectively? Negotiators in Cairo said that they'd failed to reach an agreement between Israel and Hamas. Do you think there is hope that the diplomacy will be led effectively and ultimately by Egypt?
Egypt is not the best negotiator in this case because the new government, the al-Sisi government, is an avowed enemy of Hamas. In contrast to 2012, when Egypt did negotiate with the assistance of Hillary Clinton, a ceasefire in a similar situation of hostilities, Egypt was then led by Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood, who were the protectors and defenders and some would say suppliers of Hamas. So the fact that the situation on the ground has changed so dramatically with the change of government in Egypt has made Egypt no longer the interlocutor, the leader of peace negotiations that it has been for decades and decades. Now Turkey and Qatar were trying to get involved on behalf of Hamas because they have better relations with Hamas, at least Qatar does, but that was something that Egypt was resisting. So
look at all that shit going on in the background while this stupid bitch talking all that shit.
Abu Mazen, also known as Abu
That's what I try to
Mazen,
tell y'all
the
people, man.
Palestinian Fatah contingent, the Palestinian Authority, was in Cairo.
These motherfuckers is brainwashing
but
y'all.
Hamas leaders had been exiled from Cairo.
Israeli military fires up these flares, get a good vantage point, get their sights trained, fixed on a location, and then you start hearing the artillery.
Guys, that's not my camera flaring. That's their shit
from the
flaring.
mass ground forces.
I don't know if he got like a mag light or something out there spotting some shit.
105 millimeter cannon fire, 155 millimeter howitzer, heavy artillery, which has a range of up to, I believe, probably about 4 or 5 miles.
The ground, man, I try to tell y'all guys, the ground invasion is coming. The ground invasion is coming. They breaking the border, man. What do you think I've been watching?
Pretty far range.
I stopped watching TV to watch the invasions.
This location would be about that.
The pretense to the invasions, man. You think I'm crazy or something?
Border, maybe 4.5 miles from the Israel-Gaza border to the east.
Damn sister's a doctor, dude. What the hell?
This is now the 4th or 5th
I just didn't go to
flare.
fucking school because I'm a stoner.
And that area,
I don't give a shit.
the area where these are dropping is an area that's been hit hard by Israeli airstrikes over the last few days. There's been a lot of rocket launches coming out of there as well. I'm not going to say specifically where.
See, this is how you cover some shit. The video that I recorded before, that is not covering anything. That's talking a bunch of bullshit, not looking at nothing. With the shit in the background, like I told you, if they just letting you look at it, that's mind control. If they're narrating through it like this,
there with those flares and hone in and target that area.
They're trying to teach you something. They're trying to show you something.
Probably a couple hundred yards to us. So I'm kind of kneeling down here because we are on the balcony here, just kind of looking out.
Honestly, that man need to get his ass on a plane and get the hell back to the United States, cause that shit ain't gonna be no good.
So there's been a lot of fire, and this has been happening again, intensifying over the last hour and a half, 2 hours, Shepard. I'm gonna kind of get up here.
Are you too close, John?
I told you. Shit, John might be getting killed on the news, nigga. What?
You see, that was a heavy explosion.
Ooh, John, you better get the fuck out of there, son.
That's probably maybe a mile and a half.
What?
Maybe about a mile and a half. Alright, let me put this down.
Zoom in there for us, John.
I'm just waiting for artillery fire.
With that big ass mushroom cloud.
Those flares going up. I mean, that is literally right up the street from us. That's where we were earlier today. We were driving all through the area. Okay, more cannon fire offshore. It's more cannon fire offshore. You can hear the concussion. You hear the cannon fire, you hear the echo, then you hear the strikes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Another explosion. All that's coming from the east. Those sounds are coming. The cannon fire came from the west behind the camera offshore. You're looking from the camera's vantage point, you're looking to the east. More cannon fire. There's another. So they're hitting.
Why is this shit flaring so bad?
They have to be hitting. I'm just trying to figure out. They've got to be hitting a target to the northeast and to the east, where we've seen a lot of hits. Just trying to get a fix on where I'm hearing. So cannon fire coming offshore, targeting a location to the northeast of us. We're in Gaza City, so that'd be northern Gaza. Just had several flares come within about 300 yards of our location here to the west. So really, Shep, I'm just kind of keeping give me the mic. I'm just keeping an eye out. I want to make sure that we are not going to be put in a position where if there is heavy artillery fire, if we have to scramble inside, we can get inside very quick. And again, this area, our location here in Gaza City on the coast, has really been a high target area. There's been, even, as I said, about 20 minutes ago, there were rockets launched from this area. So this has been a high target area and East Gaza. We heard that they're really hitting East Gaza in the area of Wafa Hospital. Again, a location we visited that was hit by artillery fire yesterday. And even while we were there, Shepard, it got dangerous. We packed up and got out of there quick because we heard a lot of rocket fire and a lot of incoming strikes. That's East Gaza. So that area is probably getting hit hard right now.
Yo, them flares that they shooting out there is making my camera flare.
But
sorry, this shit might be crappy footage, but it looks exactly how they got it on,
that's where those
Fox.
Troops have been amassed over the border. And we don't have any read on the movement right now. If they are going into that no man's land you talked about, Shepard, if they're going into that open area, if they're pushing in at this point, and exactly what the first contingent will be, what the force, what the ground troop, what the actual number of infantry and heavy artillery going in is going to be. I don't have a number on that, but Hamas released a statement saying that Israel will pay for this. I'm paraphrasing.
John Huddy, who's live with us. John, don't move. Updating viewers who are just joining us, Israel has launched a ground invasion of Gaza. It began at 10:30 local time in Gaza, so just about, approaching an hour and a half ago now. And John Huddy is giving us a view like you won't see on any channel in this world.
What I tell you?
I'm watching all of them.
What I tell you, son? I know Fox is watching all the channels.
We know that some 50,000 ground troops were amassed. We know that Israel is invading by land, sea, and air.
Yep.
We know that their goal is to knock out these tunnels that they say that the Hamas and its fighters are using to launch rockets and to move over into Israeli territory. We know the Israelis claim that they tried a small-scale invasion of Israel this morning through one of those tunnels, and we saw video of the Israeli Defense Forces blowing those, as they put it, terrorists up. Now John Huddy is watching as the moon rises over the Gaza and the invasion begins. John, pardon the interruption. Back to you.
That's okay. That's okay. We're just kind of keeping our eyes and ears open here. You know, Shepard, we're going into day 11 on the ground here, heading northern Gaza. That area, there is something targeting there because that area has been getting pounded right now, and also just east. Another concussion from a explosion there. All of that area, Shepard.
Guys, the footage is going to flare like that, period. It's live. I'm recording it live.
Thousands of people. And so far,
I'm not T-bowing this shit.
Are in UN set up shelters. We went to a couple of them. These people left their homes so quickly over the course of the last 72 hours. They ran out with nothing but the clothes they were wearing, some without even shoes on. And today we saw the UN bring in relief supplies, bags of sugar and salt and powdered milk for these people who have had nothing for the last couple days in anticipation of something bigger. And now we're seeing that. Now as we go into day 11 here on the ground in Gaza, coming up on midnight, this will be day 11 of this operation, Protective Edge. And now we're seeing the ground assault. As far as the size of it, the amount of troops coming in right now, we don't know. We don't have a number on that. But the Israeli military says it has two main objectives. One, to take out the infrastructure, Hamas's infrastructure, to take out those tunnels. And two, to protect the safety of Israeli civilians who have been under a constant barrage of rockets over the course of the last 11 days. More blasts. Some of those rockets, as we know, I believe they're M302s, have a range, and forgive me if I'm getting the number wrong, more explosions in the north, have a range of up to 100 miles, Shep.
John, we have to take a commercial break to reset for the top of the hour. Our coverage of two major breaking news stories will continue. The crash of Malaysia Air Flight 17, 295 people killed, and now confirmed by the United States. A surface-to-air missile shot it down. We're live in Gaza next.
Strip, the ground invasion comes after 10 days of airstrikes and rocket attacks between Israel and Hamas. Fox News correspondent John Huddy live in Gaza City with the very latest. John.
Well, Greta, this is the day that we've all been anticipating, the day that the ground offensive has started, and it has indeed. First, we heard the heavy artillery fire, and now we are hearing the small arms fire, the machine gun fire in the distance. I'd have to say, if I had to guess, maybe, I don't know, a mile and a half, 2 miles north of our location here, and that signals that troops are on the ground here in Gaza City, you know, from day one. And now, by the way, we're in day 11 here on the ground in Gaza City of Operation Protective Edge. From day one, the Israeli military says its objective is to wipe out Hamas's infrastructure, in particular going after the underground tunnels that are being used for the transport and storage of rockets, all those rockets that have been launched at Israel. That was the #1 objective from the first day. And so since then, Greta, we've been waiting to see if we see a ground offensive. Now, I told you a couple days ago, you may remember this, day before yesterday, the last time we talked anyway, I said something was brewing, something, you could feel it in the air. The IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, have been warning people to get out of their homes, to evacuate their homes and go to shelters. And that warning came over the last 24 hours, and I said, that signals that something is brewing, that something's possibly going to happen. The last time that happened was over the weekend, when we saw that intense firefight just up the coast from us that I described to you, where Special Forces troops hit the ground and raided a Hamas lost location. We even thought at one point we were in the crossfire with tracers going over. So over the last 24 hours, again, the IDF have warning people to get out of their homes, to go to shelters. Okay, then today we have a ceasefire. So people are thinking, well, maybe there's a window of opportunity here for peace. That slammed shut. Now we have the ground offensive. And all night, just to kind of give you the here and now, we've been seeing in the distance, and I'm going to kind of keep an eye out behind me here. We've seen cannon fire from offshore naval vessels pounding areas and locations here along the coast. We're in the western part of Gaza and Gaza City. The ground offensive is primarily coming from the east, okay, from the Israel-Gaza border on the east. That's where from the north of Gaza to the south, that's where all the ground troops have been amassed. So they're pushing in from the east and also most likely from the north as well, coming down here through Gaza City. Greta?
One quick question. Have we heard from Hamas at anything, of any of their leadership about the ground invasion?
Listen, hold on, listen. Okay, we got tracer fire behind me. Let me step out of the way. That's intense artillery fire, Greta. I don't know if you're hearing that.
We can hear it.
I'm going to pause for a second. Okay, that was just cannon fire from offshore. They were hitting a location. They've been going after that location north of us along the coastline. And let me just listen. So it sounded like cannon fire and then also artillery fire probably from inland north of us. You could smell the smoke. I mean, that's how close we are at this point. And just bear with me because I want to see if I hear anything. And then we just heard, again, the small arms fire. So that's probably supporting fire for the troops on the ground just to the north of us. It's very eerie because everything's black. Everything's dark. The power is out. The only time you see something is when there's an explosion. And by the way, the lights in the distance, that's all Israel. That's all Israel. That's how close we are to the Israel-Gaza border. In regards to your question, have we heard anything from us? Hamas, a spokesperson for Hamas said that Israel will pay. They said Israel will pay and that they are ready for this confrontation. And hold on. There was just some flashes, explosions. And all of this, by the way, that we're hearing, if I had to guess, Greta, this is probably 2 miles, maybe 2 miles in front of us. Explosions. This area has been a very hot area since we've been here over the course of the last few days, Greta. We've seen rocket launches from here. We've heard missile strikes, some of them getting so close to this building is shook. In fact, earlier this evening, as I was reporting, I saw several flares come down probably about 300 yards to the east of the building. So that's basically to the right of the camera. And that's most likely Israeli forces putting those flares up to pinpoint and get an idea of certain locations. And I'm going to stop there because I don't want to get into too much detail, just for safety and security reasons. But a lot of this is very, very close to our location here in Gaza City, as troops are now, as I said, they're on the ground. Greta?
John, stay safe, and of course, we'll get right back to you the second anything develops, and we're in constant contact with you and your producer. Thank you. And a surface-to-air missile deployed a passenger jumbo jet out of the